Hey everybody. Today I'm just kind of doing some parts prep here and wanted to shoot a quick video of use of a 4-inch grinder and how we bevel these tubes. So as I've said in a few of my other videos, a lot of what we do is two box tubes mated in a 90-degree corner. Well, obviously on 1/4-inch box tube, you don't want a sheared edge like that or a sharp edge, because you're not going to get very much penetration with your weld. So you've got to do a back bevel on it and then get rid of this sharp edge so that you've got a V groove for the weld to set into when you weld these together. So we do that with a 4-inch grinder. Now 4-inch grinders for garage shops or for home mechanics or whoever else is probably one of the most universal tools out there. You've got 1,000 different accessories that can go onto this. It's fairly cheap. Now the Metabo like this is a $160 grinder, give or take. You can get these Milwaukee's for about 85 bucks pretty commonly. I used to be very devout to the Metabos. They were an amazing product. In fact, this one here, which is the W7, I believe, is probably a 25 or 30-year-old grinder. I put maybe a dozen sets of brushes in it and it's still going. We had 3 of these. I'm down to 1 left now. But the 15 years, 20 years in an industrial shop was common out of these. The same used to be true for the Milwaukee's. They had a small body paddle grinder like this that was amazing for deburring, and you could get 5 to 10 years out of a $50 or $70 grinder 20 years ago. Not anymore. We get about a year to year and a half out of these now. I really do like this little Milwaukee grinder because it's small. I've got arthritis, and if you spend 2 hours to 5 hours grinding on material with a big body grinder, yeah, it doesn't get as hot, it has a little better life on your grinder, but with arthritis, it's hard to hang on to that big body grinder. So I like these little body ones because with my arthritis, it works better for me. But anyways, as I said, there's 1,000 different tools that can go on this, or accessories that can go on this. I've got a hard wheel on this one. I've got a soft wheel on this one. That's a flap disc like this. I run 40 grit for most of my deburring or beveling. We'll run 60 grit, 80 grit, whatever for cleaning up stuff. It's usually 80 or 120 for paint prep. But there's wire brushes in 100 different configurations. There's flat wire brushes. There's, any number of tools. And you've got your cutoff wheels. So like I say, these are very universal tool. Very useful for just about anything around the shop or home. When you're grinding with a wheel, you'll tend to start to wear a bevel on the end of it. So what I like to do is to keep a piece of junk metal around, clamped in your table, so that as you get that feathered edge, you can just come over and knock that feather off as your wheel wears back. It keeps some of the debris from flying in the room. As you see on these here, they're worn down pretty far, but they've got this feathered edge. Well, as you're working, you can just tip up a little bit and let it knock that off as you're working. If you're doing gouging like we are here, it's definitely an option. If you were doing finish work where you don't want to put a gouge in your work, then it's good to have a piece of junk nearby that you can knock that feather off, and you'll get better life out of your wheel by keeping that rounded out. What tends to happen if you just keep working and you get that feather building up is you'll have debris flying everywhere, especially if you've got other people in the room. It'll be throwing that debris at them. The other thing that will happen is as it gets that feather building up of loose material, the wheel will start to vibrate and go out of balance. If it gets too out of balance, it can explode. So a lot of times if you start to feel that vibration in the body of the grinder, if you just come over, start grinding on your piece of junk and then tip up. So we start grinding and then tip up and knock that feather off. It'll round the wheel out, and once again, you'll stop it from vibrating, you'll stop it from exploding. Now that is something else to keep in mind when you're grinding, is what I see happen all the time is somebody will catch a corner and it'll take a chunk out of the wheel. And natural reaction when you're grinding and you hit something and it takes the chunk out of the wheel is to lurch back. Well, what happened is, let's say this is a 12,000 RPM grinder and you're grinding with some load on it, so you're down to about 8,000 RPM on it, and you gouge the wheel, and now you come back. Well, now it just went from 8,000 RPM under load to 12,000 RPM, and that's when the wheel will explode, because it accelerated after the damage. And that wheel comes apart, and you're open air with nothing around you. You're going to take it in the gut. Your compatriots in the room are going to take pieces of it. It's going to go through a window or damage the car next to you or whatever. So when the damage occurs, get to the power switch and kill it with it still near the work. Even if you lift up a little bit, keep it near the work and keep your hands out of the way and get that power switch killed. Here's the odd thing. Sometimes you can't get to the power switch. This happens all the time. You hit that damage and it chunked, and now you can't get to the power switch and you can't kill it. Push into the work. Seems completely opposite of what you should be doing. Normally you're saying, get out of the way. In this case, as long as you've got good control over it and your hands are clear of it, you don't want that thing accelerating and exploding. Do just the opposite of what seems right. Push into the work, stop the grinder, get to the switch and kill it. I would rather have this thing burn up the motor because you stalled it than you take debris or you throw debris at your friends in the room. Now, on the Metabos, this has a slip clutch in here. So you can stall that motor and the motor will keep, or you can stall the wheel, excuse me, and the motor will keep spinning a bit so it won't burn up, which is part of why these things lasted 20 to 30 years. This one does not have a slip clutch in it, but it's also not a very powerful motor. It doesn't take much effort to stall it. So as counterintuitive as it is, when you know that that wheel is damaged and it's going to fractal debris, push into the work, get to the switch and kill it. Stall the grinder so that it doesn't blow up the wheel. So I'm just going to quick show how we process these for weld. I like these Bessie clamps, and I always try to shoot my debris at the floor. So you'll see a lot of people, it looks really cool on video to shoot your sparks up in the air, but once again, you're throwing debris at your friends, you're throwing debris all over the room. It's not real safe. So I tend to try to always make sure I'm throwing the debris at the floor, usually in an open space rather than against the wall, because it's easier to clean up. If you've got the option, shoot into the corner or shoot into the wall, it's a little safer. But it doesn't really matter whether you're using the soft wheel or the hard wheel. Soft wheel is a little more user-friendly. This one's pretty worn, so it's not going to cut real fast. I'll do one end of this tube with the soft wheel, and I'll do one end of it with the hard wheel, so that you can see the difference. Now, as you see, I'm grinding the bulk of it, rocking back and forth just a little bit, and then I'm grinding the tip, and then I went back and knocked the feather off, because just like a razor blade or whatever else, you get a little bit of a rolled curl coming off the edge, and you need to go back and clean that off. And I like to work near the corner of a table. It gives me a better clearance with good support under my piece. Since this is 1/4 inch thick, my bevel is just slightly over 1/8 inch deep. So I'm going about just a little past 50% of my depth. So that was a soft wheel. That was a 40 grit that's really worn. A new one will cut a lot faster. As you can hear, it's pretty quiet, it's soft running, it's easy on the hands, it doesn't have a lot of vibration. Hard wheels cut a lot faster, but they're a little more persnickety. If you clip a corner or something, they'll fracture some debris at you, and they're louder and messier, because this is a fiberglass back in here that you're actually burning up, whereas this is paper and sand attached to a fiberglass back. You're never actually melting the fiberglass or dissolving the fiberglass and getting it airborne. With the hard wheels, you're getting that fiberglass airborne as the wheel wears. Now notice I have a safety handle on this one. It's always a good idea to use the handle if you've got the ability. I use this grinder a lot for getting into tighter spaces, and I hold it differently. The way that I tend to hold it, because I've been running these things for 30 to 40 years, is a little different than somebody that hasn't been running it as long should. Like I say, this is my personal grinder. I've been using it for 30 years, so it's like my other hand. I'm already used to it. So you'll notice I'm holding it like this, and I'm putting my hand against the back of the guard. It's probably not the safest place to have my hand, but I know right where it is. So familiarity with the tool and accommodating my arthritis, my limited mobility issues, this works best for me, because with the hard wheel, the handle like that, my hands cramp up. With putting my hand on it like this and putting the weight into it, I can keep the vibration down. So, but the other thing that you gotta be careful with on these grinders, your hand placement, if you're over the top of the motor vents, you can limit the cooling of the motor. So you've always got to kind of keep attention to where you're putting your hands, because if you're covering up those motor vents, the motor can overheat. So just kind of a lot to keep track of on this. Like I say, if you've got the option and opportunity, keep your handles and all of your safeties in place. Sometimes you've got to make accommodations either for limited mobility or for the situation that you're working on or such. Example of that feather that's pushed off the edge. So like I say, if we're doing the mated corners that we do for our 90 degree when we weld these in, I just like to grind that back just slightly past 50% of its thickness, and I knock the tip back to about 50%. So that when we mate those together, we get a real nice V-groove on the outside and on the sides of it. So we get a good fit on these. But in general, there's some, good information on how to run a 4-inch grinder and on our process of beveling the box tubes for fitment. Thank you for watching. We're Minnesota Implement. Please check out my other 180 some videos. Some of them are on our product, some of them are good shop information like this. Thank you for watching. Please make sure to like and share our channel.